Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a question that feels, well, both ancient and incredibly relevant right now. How does the very act of calling something beautiful somehow end up creating its opposite, ugliness? And how can knowing what's good actually give rise to evil? It's this amazing paradox Laozi throws at us right at the start of Chapter 2 of the Tao Te Ching.
It really is a powerful opening.
Just think about it for a second, Open up social media. What do you see? It's flooded with these images, these specific looks that become the standard, right? The definition of beauty.
The norm, yeah.
And everyone chases it, tries to conform. But then what happens? Pretty soon, that standard, that same look everyone adopted, it starts to feel, well, hollow, maybe even ugly.
Yeah, it breeds anxiety, comparison.
Exactly. It loses its spark. And it's just this perfect, almost eerie echo of what Lao Tzu was talking about thousands of years ago.
It truly is. And it connects so well to our last deep dive. We were exploring the more abstract philosophy of the Tao from Chapter 1, that unnameable source of everything.
Right, the mystery.
But today, Laozi doesn't leave us floating up there in the cosmic ether. He takes those huge ideas and grounds them, brings them right down to earth.
Into our actual lives.
Squarely into the tangible realm of our everyday judgments, our actions, how we perceive and interact with the world. Chapter 2 is absolutely pivotal, moving from that cosmic scale to the deeply, intimately human.
Okay, that's what makes this deep dive so exciting then. So our mission today is to really dissect this second chapter, get into its original meaning, word by word.
Yeah, piece by piece.
We won't stop there. We're going to explore the amazing interpretations from commentators across, well, millennia, because each one gives us a different angle, a new lens on Laozi's genius.
Absolutely. The layers of commentary are incredible.
We're talking ancient Chinese scholars, people like Wang Bi and He Shanggong. They're from the Song Dynasty, Suzhou, Ming Dynasty's Hanshan De King, Qing Dynasty's Wang Fuzi.
And bringing it right up to the present with brilliant modern scholars like Lu Xiaogan, Chen Guiang, Zhang Jing, and Yu Qiyu. It's a rich tradition.
Wow, quite a lineup. So the goal here is to pull out these crucial insights, right? Things like the relativity of value, this interconnectedness of opposites.
It's such a core theme in Taoist thought, yeah.
And the sage's unique approach, this non-action, Wu, and the unspoken teaching. And then that profound, almost simple virtue of achieving but not dwelling.
Exactly. It's going to be a journey, digging into these subtle textual differences, these wonderfully varied scholarly viewpoints.
Yeah.
All to try and grasp the multifaceted wisdom of this really transformative chapter.
All right, let's unpack this. This is where the rubber meets the road, as they say. We'll start, as always, with the core text itself. I'll read the original Mandarin for you, nice and slow, and then give a simple literal English translation. Read slowly and clearly. Tian si ye ni zi wei ni, si ye zi wei shan si bu shan. Gu ye ge xiang sheng, nan ye xiang cheng. Chang dung xiang xing. Gao xia xiang king, yin xiang yang, gian hao xiang sui. Xi yi sheng gren, xing bu yan zi jiao. Ban wu zuo yan bu qi, shang bu ye, wei bu shi. Okay, now a straightforward English translation. When the world knows beauty is beauty, ugliness is born. When it knows good is good, evil is born.
Straight into the paradox.
Right. Then, therefore, being and non-being produce each other. Difficult and easy complete each other, long and short shape each other, high and low tilt towards each other, sound and music harmonize with each other, front and back follow each other.
The pairs, the relativities.
This is why the sage acts through non-action and teaches without words. The 10,000 things arise, and she does not decline them. She gives life but does not possess, acts but does not claim, achieves but does not dwell.
Such powerful imagery.
And the conclusion, because she does not dwell, her achievement is never lost. Wow. What a provocative way to start a chapter. When the world knows beauty is beauty, ugliness is born. What exactly is Laozi implying here? I mean, is it a literal transformation? Or is it something more fundamental about how we define things?
Yeah.
It just hits you, right? Why would beauty lead to ugliness? Or good to evil?
It is an immediate shock, isn't it? And Laozi introduces this foundational paradox right away, really challenging our usual way of thinking. He's not suggesting, that a beautiful flower literally withers and becomes ugly the moment you call it beautiful.
Okay, good. That would be weird.
It's more profound. He's telling us that the very act of defining, of recognizing a concept like beauty or good, that act simultaneously brings its opposite into existence in our minds, in our conceptual framework.
So they're not sequential, like one follows the other.
No, they're mutually arising, born together as conceptual pairs. The second you draw a line and say, this is beautiful, you've implicitly created everything outside that line as not beautiful, maybe even ugly.
Ah, I see. So it's not that beautiful things become ugly, but the concept of beauty automatically creates the concept of ugliness. That's a really crucial distinction. It sounds like a deep critique of how we standardize things, how we make value judgments.
It is, absolutely. Chen Guiying, who's done such amazing work on the Tao Te Ching, really emphasizes this point. He argues that Laozi's original meaning is precisely that. When a standard for beauty or goodness becomes universally recognized, codified, fixed, it inherently generates its opposite.
Just by existing as a standard.
Yes. It's not about change over time. It's about the inherent relativity built into definition itself. By setting up a fixed beautiful, you automatically create the category of ugly.
And Yukiyu, you mentioned him, he focuses on the psychological impact.
Yes, he does. With his wonderful poetic insight, he really zooms in on the abrupt transformation and the strong contrast in Laozi's original tone here. As Yukiyu sees it, the real danger isn't just beauty existing, it's in beauty as beauty.
Meaning,
when the reasons for beauty, the standards, the definitions, the so-called secrets of what makes something beautiful become this universally known norm, or what he calls a fixed position, a set definition.
okay, so when it gets locked down, what happens then?
Well, Yukiyu argues that when beauty gets codified like that, turned into a uniform standard, it inevitably loses its inherent qualities. Its innate nature, its creativity, its diversity.
It becomes a formula.
Exactly. A rigid, reproducible pattern, a mere formula, which Laozi paradoxically sees as fundamentally ugly. And the same logic applies to good. When goodness becomes just a prescribed set of rules or a public performance for show rather than an authentic inner state.
It can breed hypocrisy.
Precisely. It loses its genuine vitality, its life.
So, back to our social media example. When everyone chases that single defined look or tries to live up to one definition of success, it doesn't just kill originality, right? It actively breeds anxiety, comparison, this feeling of inadequacy. And ultimately, that standard itself starts to feel, well, ugly, unattainable. Laozi's warning seems crystal clear. Beauty and goodness are fine, let them exist. But don't try to nail down their causes or set rigid norms. And definitely don't try to make those norms universal.
Because the moment you do,
You open the door for their opposites to rush in.
that's the core of it. Now, this incredibly provocative opening has, unsurprisingly, led to a fascinating range of interpretations over the centuries. Each commentator sheds a slightly different light on the nature of these opposites.
Like who?
Well, take Wang Bi, a really pivotal figure in early Chinese philosophy. He describes these pairs as ally.
Which means?
Literally, same root, same door. He sees beauty, ugliness, as being like joyinger, or good, not good, as right, wrong. These pairs, he argues, share a common origin. You can't just single one out and elevate it.
Why not?
Because the moment you do, its opposite immediately arises. They're intrinsically linked by what he calls, nature's inherent state, or its underlying logic. It dictates they come into being together.
So it's not just that they exist side by side, but trying to isolate one actually creates the other in our perception. Wow, that's subtle but powerful.
Exactly. Then you have Suje, a brilliant Song Dynasty scholar. He takes it even deeper with his concept of
Mutual generation and
mutual negation, or maybe mutual creation and mutual displacement. He goes beyond just saying they're generated together. He emphasizes that these external things, these forms and names, labels, they aren't static.
they change.
Constantly changing, constantly displacing each other in this dynamic flow. They are not the constant absolute truth. He uses this really vivid example.
Oh, yeah.
It means you think you're tall, but then you meet someone taller, and suddenly, relatively speaking, you become short.
Right. It's all relative.
Exactly. And he warns that clinging to these relative, constantly shifting forms and labels, that leads you to be far astray from the true path, the Tao. You get caught in the illusion of fixed categories.
That makes perfect sense. It's the clinging to the label, the fixed definition, that causes the trouble, not the thing itself. What about a more practical take? focusing on social behavior.
For that, we can look at He Gong. He's an ancient scholar known for his focus on youth self-cultivation, often with a view towards practical benefits and avoiding harm.
Okay.
He interprets this opening verse as a series of pretty direct warnings about social consequences. He suggests that you boasting about your own beauty or virtue,
Showing off.
basically, yes. He says it directly leads to danger and ruin. And similarly, gaining fame or merit from subtle, consciously doing good deeds just to be recognized.
Seeking validation.
Right. He says that leads to intense human contention, rivalry, jealousy. His interpretation really shifts the focus from abstract philosophy to the very real practical dangers of showing off, of pride, and that relentless chase for external approval.
That's a very direct, almost like a cautionary tale. Don't be prideful, don't seek praise, it leads to trouble. How does, say, a Buddhist perspective look at this, especially with the focus on the mind in Buddhism?
Oh, that's fascinating too. Hanshan Deking, a prominent Ming Dynasty Buddhist monk, brings this lens. He sees the problem stemming from
The discriminating mind.
Exactly. The mind's inherent tendency to discriminate, to choose, to prefer some things over others. These distinctions, he argues, this is the fault of over-venerating names, concepts, labels, giving them too much weight.
Okay.
And he illustrates this with a couple of great anecdotes. One is the story of West Shi, this famous beauty. But when the less attractive East Shi tried to blindly imitate her way of looking beautiful, it just became ridiculous, an object of mockery.
So imitation without substance turns ugly.
Right. It shows how mimicking a standardized beauty without any innate charm just doesn't work. And then he tells the story of the virtuous minister Bigon, killed by the tyrant King Zhu for being too upright.
Goodness leading to destruction.
Yes, and Hanshan Deking points out how this goodness, when fixated upon as a rigid ideal, led to strife, especially when others then blindly imitated Bigon's loyalty, potentially leading to their own destruction. It shows how even goodness can become harmful when it's a rigid fixation.
So again, it's the attachment to the label, the imitation, that causes the negativity, not the original quality itself. Powerful Buddhist insight there.
Precisely. Then there's Wang Fuzi, a major Qing dynasty scholar. He offers a more, maybe overarching metaphysical view. He states,
Two extremes arise from unity.
correct. For him, all the world's changes, including these pairs of opposites, ultimately boil down to these two extremes. But crucially, these extremes themselves emerge from a single underlying unity, the Tao.
So they're inseparable aspects of the whole.
Yes. Beauty inherently necessitates ugliness. Good inherently necessitates evil, because they are fundamentally two sides of the same coin, inseparable aspects of one reality.
It sounds like he's saying it's just the fundamental nature of reality. This is how it works. Opposites define each other.
Indeed. And beyond these specific famous commentators, there are also broader interpretations that echo this. One emphasizes inherent imperfection and transformation.
Meaning?
That even things, beautiful and good things, inherently contain elements of not beautiful, not good, and they're destined to transform into their opposites as part of the natural cycle of things. It's seen as To'o, the inevitable operation of the great Tao.
The constant ebb and flow.
Exactly. Which leads to another interpretation that sees this passage as essentially China's earliest systematic and profound explanation of the law of unity of opposites. This becomes the foundation, really, for Laozi's Silsis, his law of contradiction or dialectics, which is hugely influential in later Chinese philosophy.
Wow, so this isn't just Taoist thought. It's foundational for understanding contradictions and dialectics in Chinese philosophy overall. That's significant.
Absolutely. And, to bring it back to a modern scholarly synthesis, Liu Xiaogan offers this really helpful three-level understanding of the opening paradox.
Okay, where are the levels?
First, he says, it signifies conceptual coexistence. Simply put, beauty and ugliness, good and not good, they just arise as conceptual pairs. You can't think of one without implicitly defining the other.
Got it. Conceptual pairs.
Second, it points to the mutual generation of phenomena. The actual existence of beautiful things in the world implies and helps define the existence of ugly things, and vice versa. They make each other perceivable.
Okay, phenomena in the world. And the third?
And this, Liu Xiaogan argues, is the crucial layer. It's a powerful critique of blind conformity. This is key. When everyone conforms to a single rigid definition of beauty or goodness, it actually becomes destructive.
Destructive how?
Destructive to true beauty, to originality, to genuine virtue. It breeds hypocrisy. Laozi is criticizing this this blind convergence, everyone chasing the same thing as being counterproductive. It's the start, Lu Xiaogan says, of hypocrisy and false goodness.
Oh.
And this reflects Laozi's deep preference for values that are natural, diverse, alive, spontaneous, over those that are rigid, standardized, and forced upon people.
That really brings it home. It's not just abstract philosophy, it's a stark warning against groupthink, against rigid definitions, against chasing external standards that ultimately diminish us. Okay, so after setting up this profound paradox, Laozi immediately expands on it, right? He shows this isn't just about beauty and goodness. He lists 6 more pairs of interdependent concepts.
Exactly, he says. Cicerone say. He was break was down.
Okay, being and non-being produce each other. You only know what is by contrast with what is not. Existence defines non-existence, and vice versa.
Makes sense. Difficult and easy complete each other. The experience of difficulty is what makes ease feel truly easy, truly appreciated. One defines the other.
Right.
Long and short shape each other. You can't have a concept of long without an implicit concept of short. They define each other relatively.
Okay, high and low.
High and low tilt towards, or maybe better, rely on each other. Something is high only in relation to what is low. They give each other context.
Sound and music.
Sound and music harmonize with each other. Music is essentially organized sound. Sound is the raw material for music. They're intrinsically linked.
And finally, front and back.
Front and back follow each other. Logically, you can't have a front without a back. They're inseparable parts of a single whole.
It's like he's saying, look, people, this isn't just about your judgments of beauty or goodness. This is fundamental. This is how reality is structured. It's woven into the fabric of existence.
Precisely. The core message is crystal clear. These are not isolated static concepts. They are 2 sides of a single dynamic reality, constantly in this dance of mutual creation and definition. And understanding this is absolutely key to navigating the world without getting constantly frustrated. Because these oppositions aren't problems to solve, they're a natural inevitability.
They're just part of the deal.
They're part of the deal. They are intrinsic aspects of reality to be understood and really accepted, not fought against.
You mentioned subtle textual nuances earlier. For high and low, for instance, our common text uses yin, kring, which you translated as tilt towards or rely on. But I remember reading that some older versions use a different character, ging, suggesting fullness or overflowing. Does that little difference actually change the meaning much?
It certainly can, and it's a fantastic example of how even one character can open up layers of meaning in history. Definitely emphasizes that mutual reliance, how high leans on low, how they define each other through dependence. But ying, found in some early manuscripts like the Mawangdui silk texts, means fullness or overflowing. This might imply something more like mutual manifestation, or maybe even cyclicality.
How so?
It could suggest that the very existence of high allows Lao to be presented or appear, and vice versa. Or maybe it hints at a cycle, something reaches its fullness and then begins to decline, inevitably leading towards its opposite, like a cup overflowing. There's even another variant in the bamboo slips, which might also be read as ying.
So it could be fullness, appearance, or even a cycle.
Exactly. Scholars like Lu Xiaogan and Chen Gaiying lean towards being original. Lu Xiaogan even speculates might have been a later change to avoid a name taboo of an emperor whose name included Ying. Chen Gaiying sees Yi as meaning to present or appear, so mutually manifesting. Yu Qiyu finds both good but likes Yi for emphasizing mutual proof, how high proves low exists.
Wow, the detective work involved. And there are other variations too, right? Like particles yi and yi appearing in early texts.
Yes, many early texts use ah as a conjunction, like long and short then shape each other, creating maybe a more flowing rhythm. And ending phrases with u wu gives a calmer, more measured tone, often found in the Mawangdui texts. There's even a rare ho wu, meaning always so, after front and back follow each other in the Mawangdui text, suggesting the perpetual nature of these relationships, though its originality is debated since it's not in the even earlier bamboo slips.
It just shows how fluid these texts were. So, okay, minor variations aside, what are the broader philosophical takeaways from these 6 pairs? What's the big picture Laozi is painting?
Well, Wang Bi, for example, sees them as demonstrating shui, a clear law of natural inseparability. Basically, in their natural state, these opposites are locked together. You can't pick and choose. You can't have just the easy without the difficult.
Trying to isolate one is fundamentally misunderstanding reality. Got it.
Exactly. He Gong again brings his practical self-cultivation angle for being non-being, he says, see being, but understand non-being. It's a call to shift from clinging to external forms to recognizing impermanence, non-attachment.
Like seeing through appearances.
Right. And for high-low, he advises high, see high, but choose to act low. Promote humility, avoid contention, don't be arrogant.
Practical virtues.
Very. And uniquely for his time, he applies it to social order, too. He interprets sound music as superiors lead, inferiors must follow. And front back becomes superiors act, inferiors imitate.
That's a very hierarchical reading. Fits the Han Dynasty context, I suppose, applying Taoism to governance.
Definitely. Then you have Zhan Jing, a modern scholar, offering very concrete, almost physical interpretations. He reads no ease as the mutual generation of matter, and space, tying it back to his unique take on Chapter 1.
Matter and space creating each other.
Interesting. Yeah. He sees Ilo literally as mutual dependence, like one object physically leaning on another, and a simple distinction between raw sound and refined music.
Very grounded interpretations.
Chen Guiying, meanwhile, makes a crucial distinction. He stresses that the being non-being here, is about the presence or absence of phenomena in the world, not the same as the cosmic being is born from non-being in Chapter 40, which deals with the ultimate origin of the universe.
Ah, that's important. Different scales of meaning for the same terms. Good clarification.
Yes. Gikuyu, coming back to him, believes these pairs are just so self-evident, so obviously true, that the implication is clear. Humans should stop recklessly interfering, stop trying to force outcomes. Nature already has these dynamics perfectly balanced.
Just get out of the way.
Essentially, yes, don't meddle when the universe has its own rhythm. And a broader interpretation just reinforces this. These transformations, these interdependencies are simply the intrinsic nature of everything. Constant change, constant connection. That is reality.
Okay, so this universal dance of opposites is constant, it's unavoidable, it's just how the world works. And understanding that profound reality leads directly to Laozi's advice for the sage, the wise person. After describing this dynamic balance, he says,
Therefore, the sage acts through non-action and teaches without words.
Right. It seems like the wise person, understanding this balance, doesn't try to eliminate one side of the opposition, doesn't try to get rid of difficult or low or ugly. Instead, they work in harmony with this natural flow.
Precisely. And this brings us to the absolute cornerstone of Taoist practice, and probably one of the most famous, yet often misunderstood, concepts in the whole Tao Te Ching. Wuwei, non-action.
Which doesn't mean doing nothing.
Absolutely not. That's the first thing to clarify. It's not passivity. It means acting, but acting without ego, without unnecessary force, without going against the grain of natural principles, and without letting subjective prejudices or personal desires dictate the action.
It's like allowing things to unfold naturally.
Exactly. Think of a skilled sailor using the wind and currents, not fighting them. Wang Bi, again, gives us such a profound insight here, cutting right to the core. Sure.
Nature is already sufficient. Acting spoils it.
Yes. This is central for Wang Bi. He sees Wuwei as arising from this deep recognition that things, in their natural state, are already complete, already sufficient. Any deliberate artificial intervention that goes against this natural state will disrupt the balance and ultimately lead to failure.
So it's about knowing when not to interfere, or how to interfere, minimally, maybe. Harmoniously. It sounds like a very active, very intelligent kind of non-action.
Exactly right. It requires great awareness. Suzhe, from the Song Dynasty, offers this incredibly nuanced view centered on the heart or mind. He says,
Which means
acting in the midst of affairs, but with a non-acting heart. This makes it crystal clear. The sage does act. They engage with the world, but their inner state, their motivation, is one of non-attachment. No selfish intent, no forcing outcomes. It's all about the attitude behind the action, not the absence of action itself.
Okay, so it's an internal state.
Yes. Hanshan De King, the Buddhist monk, expresses it similarly as responding without intentionality. The sage knows that empty fame isn't worth chasing, so they respond to situations with no ego, no premeditated plan, mirroring the Hado of heaven and earth itself, which operates without a personal agenda.
That makes Wuwei sound incredibly sophisticated. It's a mindset, not just sitting still. It's about letting go of that need to control on a really deep level.
Yes, exactly. Zhanjing frames Wu Wei more as active compliance with nature, he says. Following principles, leveraging resources, promoting natural trends. Right. He draws on other ancient texts, like the Wenzi, to show Wu Wei as actively doing things, but doing them in accordance with objective laws without letting personal desires get in the way, allowing things to develop naturally. Think of a farmer who understands the seasons, the soil, the needs of the plants.
They act by planting, weeding, watering.
Yes, but they don't try to force a harvest in the middle of winter. They work with nature, not against it. And Ukiyo, in his poetic way, captures this beautifully. He says the sage acts without acting because nature is already acting.
Ah, because the universe itself is doing the heavy lifting.
Why interfere when the universe is already engaged in this vast, perfect, natural action? The sage's role is to align with that grand cosmic rhythm.
So nature's constantly doing on this huge scale, and the sage just rides the wave. That sounds like it could actually lead to great accomplishments, not just passive withdrawal.
Absolutely. And that counters the misconception of Wu Wei as mere idleness. One interpretation strongly argues that Wu Wei, properly understood, it is great accomplishment, especially when it's based on obeying objective laws and grasping the principal and secondary aspects of a situation.
Is there historical evidence for this?
Oh, yes. The classic example is the rule of emperors Wen and Jing during the Han Dynasty. This was a golden age of peace and prosperity that flourished explicitly under the influence of Huanlao Taoist principles, essentially governing through non-action.
What did that look like in practice?
Remarkably lenient policies, lighter taxes, gentler laws, minimal interference in people's lives, focusing on letting society recover and develop naturally after years of turmoil. And it worked spectacularly. It proved that Wu Wei could be an incredibly effective and productive form of governance.
Wow. A powerful historical example showing this wisdom isn't just theory, it can actually build prosperous societies. But what about Wang Fuzi's take? You mentioned it was more strategic, maybe even cynical.
Wang Fuzi, yeah, he often brings this pragmatic, sometimes critical Confucian lens. He suggests Laozi's Wu Wei is actually a very sophisticated strategy. It's based on understanding that contradictions and problems often resolve themselves naturally if you just wait.
So patience is key.
Patience and non-interference. By not jumping in, by letting the dynamics play out, the sage can achieve their goals effortlessly. Wang Fuzi even hints it could be seen as a subtle husinan, a clever way of getting credit without appearing to strive for it. He sees it as a high-level, almost Machiavellian understanding of natural processes. Position yourself correctly, wait, and reap the benefits without expending direct effort.
A kind of skilled contention by not contending at all, playing the long game where patience becomes the ultimate power move. Okay, now what about the other side of this coin? Unspoken teaching? Teaches without words. Does that mean literal silence?
Not necessarily literal silence, no. And this is another concept that's frequently misunderstood. It's not about just being mute. It's about influencing others through your own conduct, through your being.
Leading by example.
Leading by example is a big part of it. Also, creating a harmonious environment where learning can happen implicitly. Allowing others to arrive at understanding through their own experience and observation, rather than through direct instruction or dogma.
So words aren't the main tool.
Right. Wang Bida draws a parallel with Wu Wei again. He says, Uju.
Wisdom is self-contained. Intervention makes it false.
Exactly. The sage knows that true wisdom is inherent in things, in nature, and within individuals. Explicit verbal teaching can actually be artificial, false, potentially obscuring that natural innate wisdom by imposing external concepts and frameworks.
So words can actually get in the way of real understanding, especially when it's about natural principles or self-realization.
Indeed. Suji echoes this beautifully with, huh?
Speaking while teaching, but with the intent of non-speaking? That sounds very Zen.
It does, doesn't it? Again, the emphasis is on the sage's inner intention. It's about transcending the limitations of mere words to inspire self-realization, not to force indoctrination or rote learning. It's a very subtle, very high-level form of teaching, guiding without dictating. Hanjan Deking puts it simply. Da. Knowing many words are not useful. The sage gets the limits of talk and uses unspoken teaching to genuinely transform people from the inside out.
This connects right back to chapter 1, doesn't it? The idea that the ultimate Tao, the deepest truths, can't actually be fully expressed in words. Words are always approximations, always insufficient.
Precisely. Jianjing explicitly connects it to that very idea. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Therefore, verbal teaching, he says, is inherently second-rate compared to experiential learning or leading by example.
He uses that phrase, sha.
Yes, teaching by example is more important than verbal instruction. He links it to what he saw as a chronic problem in Chinese culture. The discrepancy between thought and action, saying one thing and doing another. Hypocrisy, basically.
He gives examples.
Two really compelling ones. First, Wang Tai from the Zhuangzi. This was a man with physical disabilities, yet students flocked to him just as much as they did to Confucius, even though Wang Tai apparently never spoke.
Never spoke. How did they learn?
The text says they came empty and returned full. Just being in his presence, observing his state of being, transmitted wisdom. It shows the incredible power of teaching through pure embodiment.
Wow. That's almost mystical. And the second example,
Zhang Zong, a Taoist from the Jin dynasty mentioned in the Jinshu, he taught by form, not words. His disciples learned simply by observing his conduct, his presence. They apparently met in silence every 5 days just to absorb his wisdom through being near him.
incredible. Teaching without a single uttered word. And Yu, again, his poetic take.
His poetic reason for this unspoken teaching is simply because nature is already speaking. The sage doesn't need to add more noise because nature itself is constantly delivering this grand, profound lesson. Our job is just to learn to listen, to align our perception with it, not to be told what to think.
Just tune into the universe's broadcast. Okay, so these interpretations give us a really clear picture of Laozi's sage, the Hu. This figure embodies Wuwei and She, reflecting the Tao's own natural, effortless, yet profoundly effective way of operating. And this sage is quite different from, say, the Confucian ideal sage, right?
Very different. Chen Guiying highlights these key distinctions really well. The Taoist sage focuses on hope embodying and trusting nature's flow, on hope expanding one's inner spiritual and mental life, on hope cultivating emptiness, tranquility, non-contention. They tend to disdain conventional, rigid moral doctrines and ultimately seek complete spiritual and physical freedom.
Whereas the Confucian sage is more
of a uten, a standardized moral figure focused on social ethics, on active intervention in society, on upholding rituals and prescribed moral conduct. It's a very different emphasis.
So broadly, it's inner cultivation leading to harmony versus active societal shaping through morality.
Exactly. And Wang Fuji, remember him, writing from his often critical Confucian standpoint, he even labels the Laozi-style sage as an sage of other schools, meaning outside the Confucian orthodoxy.
Heterodox sage.
Yes. He describes this sage as having a mind like the vast emptiness, having no personal desire for achievement or merit, only responding when there's a sense of mutual resonance or natural connection. He even goes so far as to call this sage a sage among animals.
Among animals. Why?
To emphasize their pure naturalness, their lack of intention or premeditation, which, from Wang Fuzi's Confucian perspective, was actually problematic. It signaled a lack of cultivated human moral consciousness. It's a really striking and critical comparison he makes.
Wow, that really draws a sharp line. Framing the Taoist sage as embodying this almost primal natural wisdom, distinct from cultivated human morality. Okay, this understanding of the sage acting through Wu Wei and teaching without words leads us directly to the ultimate virtue described at the end of the chapter. This is 1-point exam. So your ultimate virtues described at the end of the chapter. This part beautifully details the sage's profound character and holds the secret to lasting impact, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's the culmination of everything discussed so far. Let's unpack that first phrase. Wan wuzua yan erbusi. Our translation was, all things arise and she does not decline them or interfere. But there's a textual debate here, right?
Yes, the booty part.
Exactly. Scholars like Lu Xiaogan and Chen Geiying, looking at the earliest manuscripts, the Fuyi text, Dunhuang texts, Mawangdui silk text, Guodian bamboo slips, find compelling evidence that the original reading was likely Wujiu or Fush, meaning not initiating or not claiming to be the originator. Precisely, not declining. The change to intor in later versions that became standard is probably what they call intor, linguistic convergence, where texts get sort of harmonized or simplified over time.
So the original meaning was likely more about not claiming to be the source or the prime mover. That feels like a significant difference.
It is. Lu Xiaogan interprets this as a doganosa yu yo, not considering oneself the sole creator or originator of things. The idea is, since everything arises naturally from countless factors, from the Tao itself, the sage, even if they played a big role, doesn't claim sole credit for starting it all.
Why is that important?
This humility, this non-claiming of being the first cause, avoids future problems. The ego trap, the burden of ownership, the potential for blame if things go wrong. It aligns with the understanding that creation is a collective, natural process.
That's a subtle but really powerful shift. Okay, next phrase. Tue kikde. Gives life but does not possess. Seems straightforward, but I feel like there was a big textual note here too.
You remember correctly. This is a crucial point textually. Lu Xiaogan and Chen Geiying state quite definitively that this entire phrase, Lu, is actually absent in the earliest recovered texts.
Completely absent. From Guodian and Mawangdui.
Yes, it's not there. Their inference is that it was likely added later, probably borrowed from chapter 10 or chapter 51, where a very similar phrasing appears, go she whose, gives life but doesn't possess, acts but doesn't rely, leads but doesn't dominate.
Wow. So it might not even be originally part of chapter 2. That's mind-blowing. It really shows how these ancient texts evolved. Scribes maybe completed them based on other parts of the work.
Exactly. Seeking to harmonize the teachings, perhaps. It highlights the fluidity we have to acknowledge. But where the phrase does appear in later, more common versions, how is it understood?
Right. What's the interpretation when it is included?
Well, He Shanggong, for example, attributes to the Yongqi, the primordial energy or cosmic force. He says this force generates everything but doesn't possess or hold on to what it creates. The sage, then, simply emulates this fundamental virtue of the cosmos itself.
So the sage acts like a conduit for this universal life force, embodying its generosity without claiming ownership. Nice. What about Ryorji acts but does not claim or rely?
He Shanggong interprets this as, "Oh, yu shi." The Tao's actions do not expect reward or reciprocation. So the sage, following the Tao, acts without seeking or expecting anything back. No personal benefit, no recognition, no repayment.
Pure action for its own sake.
Yes. Zhang Jing expands on this, seeing it as Shananqi helping all things without seeking their return. And he points out that classic lousy paradox here. The less you seek reward, the more reward you ultimately receive. Not tangible payment, perhaps, but lasting impact, peace, and virtue.
That sounds like a universal principle. True generosity is its own reward and somehow leads to abundance. Okay, and now the culminating phrase, the big one. Hu hu gongcheng er fuju. Achievements complete, but does not dwell or claim credit.
This is absolutely central, a truly profound Taoist virtue. The task is done, success is achieved, but the sage doesn't cling to it, doesn't take personal credit, doesn't reside in the glory or the position that comes with it.
He Shanggong had a practical take on this too, right?
Yeah.
Especially for rulers.
Yes, very pragmatic, he says. Once success is achieved, withdraw and do not remain in the position of honor or cling to the seat of power. It's advice focused on self-preservation, avoiding the pitfalls of success, the envy, the complacency, the targets that high positions can create.
Makes sense for a ruler, or anyone in power. Avoid the dangers of clinging to status. But Wang Bi went deeper philosophically, didn't he, into why the sage doesn't claim credit.
He did, and it's a profound insight. Wang Bi says, "Ooh."
Acting in accordance with things' nature, success arises from them, thus not claiming credit.
Exactly. For Wang Bi, the sage's success isn't solely because of their individual brilliance or effort. It's largely because they correctly understood and utilized the inherent nature of things. They aligned with the natural flow. Therefore, the credit, the achievement, truly originates from the things themselves or from the Tao's natural operations. So the sage has no legitimate basis to claim it all for themselves.
So it's not just humility, it's an accurate understanding of where success actually comes from in a Taoist worldview.
Precisely. It's a clear-eyed view of causality. Success is a collaboration with the Tao, with the nature of things, not just an individual triumph.
That completely reframes how we think about achievement. Less about individual glory, more about skillful collaboration with how the world already works.
Exactly. Sujay connects this non-dwelling to achieving a truly transcendent state of beauty and goodness that's beyond the relative pairs we started with. A state that won't automatically be followed by its opposite, evil or non-good. It transcends that cycle.
By letting go, you reach a higher state.
That's the idea. And Hanshan de Keen uses that beautiful analogy of heaven and earth again. They act with no ego, no intention. They give life, nurture everything, but don't possess, don't rely on their power. And after their immense work is done season after season, they don't dwell on it, don't issue press releases.
Oh, right.
This cosmic, egoless action is the ultimate model for the sage.
Okay, this all builds beautifully to the final stunning paradox that ends the chapter. Fua fuiju shi inbuku. Because she does not dwell, her achievement is never lost. This has to be the ultimate paradoxical wisdom, right?
It really is. The absolute peak of Taoist paradoxical insight. By not clinging to success, by releasing it, letting it go, its positive impact somehow becomes permanent. Its value becomes timeless. It's that strategy of huir ator into Farishan, retreat to advance, or maybe non-contention as the highest form of contention.
Let it go to keep it forever. How did the commentators unpack this final piece?
He Shanggong, predictably, focuses on the tangible, long-term benefits for the individual. Blessings and virtue will always remain and not depart from oneself. Not clinging brings lasting good fortune.
Practical payoff.
Wang Bi uses his typical logical style, arguing the inverse as proof.
If credit is kept for oneself, success cannot last.
Exactly. He argues that if you claim all the credit, it feeds the ego, creates a desire for more control, more recognition. This leads to subsequent actions driven by ego, actions that deviate from Shay, the natural way. And those actions ultimately unravel or destroy the original achievement. So non-claiming, paradoxically, ensures the continuity and longevity of the good work.
That's a powerful warning. Claiming credit feels good momentarily, but it's the recipe for impermanence, for things falling apart. It's fleeting.
And Suzia takes non-dwelling to its deepest level, an internal state of non-attachment, completely independent of external circumstances. He gives these powerful examples. Diopia, Tiolu, dwelling in poverty without poverty's worries, dwelling in wealth without wealth burdens.
Yes. This inner freedom, being unbound by any external situation, good or bad, that is the true sushi. And he concludes, this is the highest dwelling. When you truly don't reside psychologically in external achievements, failures, statuses, then those things, their value, their impact, their very existence in your life, they cannot depart.
Because you're not holding on to them in the first place.
Exactly. This profound non-attachment paradoxically grants the deepest, most lasting form of feast, dwelling, presence, or even possession. It's very similar to the Buddhist concept of duzu, dwelling without dwelling, not abiding. So by completely letting go of the need for ownership or recognition, you gain this unshakable inner presence, this profound ownership that can't be taken away. That's utterly liberating.
Hanshan Deking summarizes it beautifully. Supreme achievement becomes imperishable. True reputation endures. By not dwelling, the achievement becomes immortal, detached from a fading ego. By not chasing false fame, true reputation, based on authentic contribution, lasts.
And Wang Fuzi, with his strategic view.
He puts it starkly. He suggests those who forcefully build a fortress, claim credit, consolidate power there are merely residing in a temporary structure. But the sage, by waiting, by not claiming, simply reaps the benefits effortlessly. And this benefit does not depart. That, he says, is the highest form of contention or strategy.
Wow. A final strategic twist. He also had a critique related to this about holding to one.
Yes, from his Confucian perspective, he criticized what he saw as the Taoist Buddhist approach of Boyu, holding to one principle to achieve unity. as if starting from dispersion and trying to get back to oneness. He contrasted this with the Confucian idea of yuquan, an all-pervading unity already inherent in everything, and yi, the inherent unity of opposites. For Wang Fuzi, the truly wise person starts from unity as fundamental, not from duality seeking to return to one. It's a subtle but deep philosophical critique of the starting point.
Okay, what an incredible journey through the text and centuries of interpretation. We've dissected Chapter 2 word by word. Now, the crucial part, the real deep dive into relevance. How on earth can we apply this ancient wisdom to our modern lives? Our busy, often recognition-obsessed world. How can Laozi's insights actually change how we live day to day?
Well, let's circle back to where we started that social media hook, the trends. Laozi's critique of the beauty when beauty is known as beauty, ugliness is born, is incredibly potent guidance here.
Awesome.
It helps us navigate that constant pressure, the fads, the urge to conform. It prompts us to question standardized definitions of beauty or success or a good life, whether it's a body type, a career path, a lifestyle choice promoted online or elsewhere.
And value something else instead.
Yes. To value genuine individuality, authentic creativity, real inner peace both in ourselves and in others, rather than chasing some fleeting, externally defined ideal. It helps us see how chasing a uniform standard doesn't just stifle true beauty, it actively breeds widespread dissatisfaction and anxiety.
That's a huge lesson for creators, artists, businesses, even educators, isn't it? Fostering diversity over formulas.
Exactly. In any field, art, design, business strategy, parenting, education, we can apply this principle. Forcing a single norm or a one-size-fits-all solution often suffocates true value, creativity, and diverse approaches. When we try to standardize something that thrives on being organic and unique, we paradoxically make it less effective, less vital, less beautiful in the truest sense.
So it encourages us to look closer, to appreciate the unconventional.
Yes, to ask ourselves, how are we defining success or beauty in our own lives? Are those definitions truly serving us, or are they trapping us in constant comparison? It nudges us to cultivate an appreciation for the subtle, the unique, the uncodified forms of beauty and goodness that are all around us, often overlooked.
Okay, and what about embracing that universal dance of opposites, one no? How does truly getting that help us deal with the frustrations and anxieties life inevitably throws our way?
Oh, it's fundamentally transformative for our mental and emotional well-being. When we truly recognize, deep down, that difficult moments are often what give meaning or context to the easy times, that failures aren't just dead ends, but inherently inform and lay the groundwork for future successes, our whole perspective shifts.
How does it shift?
Understanding concepts like orasa helps us reduce frustration, self-blame, anxiety when we face challenges. We stop seeing obstacles as absolute negatives or personal failings. Instead, we start seeing them as integral, even necessary parts of a larger dynamic reality.
They're not roadblocks, they're part of the landscape.
Exactly. Part of the journey. They often lead to growth, deeper understanding, resilience, and eventually a new kind of ease. It stops being about avoiding the difficult and starts being about understanding its necessary role in the whole picture, in creating contrast and value.
So challenges aren't just speed bumps. They're part of the fundamental rhythm. That's much more empowering, much less frustrating. Okay, now how does Wuwei play out in, say, modern leadership, in teams? Places often plagued by micromanagement or ego battles.
A great leader, in this Taoist sense, practices Wuwei by focusing on creating the optimal conditions for their team to thrive. They provide the necessary resources, clear direction, support, trust, and then they step back.
They don't micromanage.
No, they don't try to control every detail or take over. They embody those later lines. They foster growth, empower team members, but don't possess the outcome or claim sole ownership. They practice. They act decisively when needed, guide, remove obstacles, but without boasting about their own contribution or relying solely on their authority. And crucially, the team achieves great things, but the leader doesn't hoard the credit. They share it, celebrate the team's success.
That sounds like the absolute opposite of the stereotypical glory-hogging boss. It's about enabling others.
Precisely. And the result, it's profound. You get an empowered, motivated, loyal team. You get sustainable success that isn't fragilely dependent on one person's ego. You get a positive ripple effect throughout the whole organization. This kind of Wuwei leadership builds resilience, innovation, and genuine thriving, far more effectively than leadership driven by control and individual ego. It's about building lasting capacity.
That makes total sense. True, collective growth. Okay, and for us as individuals, in our personal goals, our careers, our creative work, how can achieving but not dwelling actually influence our daily work and our sense of fulfillment?
It encourages a fundamental shift in focus. From the external outcome, the praise, the promotion, the sales figures, the likes, to the internal process and intention. Do your work with care, with passion, with integrity. Pour your heart into it, but
Yeah.
then consciously release your attachment to the results.
Let go of the need for validation.
Exactly. Let go of the need for specific praise, rewards, external validation. This cultivates authenticity and a deep sense of freedom. When you act without desperately clinging to the outcome or needing that external pat on the back, you liberate yourself from so much anxiety, from that draining cycle of comparison, from the constant seeking of approval.
And the work itself benefits.
Immensely. Your work becomes inherently more authentic, less burdened by expectation, and paradoxically, its positive impact often becomes more profound and lasting, because karchil truly leads to clear. By not clinging to it, its true value, its contribution is never lost. It resonates longer.
This really feels like a quiet revolution from within, especially in a world obsessed with metrics, personal branding, and constant self-promotion. Yeah, this is all incredibly inspiring, but how can our listeners start practicing this profound wisdom in a tangible way? This week, what's one actionable step? Okay, here's a simple, concrete practice for this week. Let's call it the Anonymous Act. Find something helpful, something kind, something constructive to do for someone else, or maybe for your community, your workplace common area, whatever. But here's the key. Ensure it's done completely anonymously.
No credit needed.
Zero credit. It could be leaving an unexpectedly generous tip without being seen. It could be tidying up a messy common space that nobody asked you to clean. It could be sending an encouraging, supportive note to a colleague or friend, but without signing your name. Just let them receive it.
The core goal is simply to perform a good deed purely for its own sake. You're practicing acting without claiming and achieving without dwelling on the credit, and maybe the most important and challenging part.
Let it go.
Completely let it go afterward. Release any expectation of recognition, gratitude, reward, even internal self-congratulation. Just do the act and let it dissolve into the flow of things.
And what's the benefit of doing that?
By consciously doing this, you get a direct experiential taste of that profound power in Tafashi. By not clinging to the act or its outcome, by releasing it without personal attachment, its positive impact becomes truly internal, genuine. It builds intrinsic worth. And paradoxically, its goodness, its effect, is never lost in its spiritual or even subtle real-world influence. You cultivate that inner non-dwelling.
What a journey we've been on today. We've reached the end of our deep dive into Chapter 2 of the Tao Te Ching. Just, wow. What a profound exploration through these paradoxes of existence, this universal dance of opposites, and the truly liberating wisdom of the sage.
It really shows how life isn't this rigid set of absolutes we often try to make it, but this incredibly dynamic, fluid, ever-changing interplay of forces, constantly generating, constantly completing, constantly shaping each other.
Yeah. And how releasing that very human need to control everything, to rigidly define, to claim ownership, how that release is actually the path to greater harmony, real inner peace, and maybe even more lasting value in what we do.
Absolutely. The greatest achievements, the most impactful contributions, maybe they aren't the ones we shout about or put on our resume. Maybe they're the ones we generously contribute without attachment, because their value then becomes truly timeless, unbound by our fleeting egos or changing circumstances.
Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible exploration. I really hope you, listening, are as captivated by Laozi's insights as I am right now.
It's endlessly fascinating.
It really is. Next time, we'll be diving into Chapter 3, where Laozi gives some really startling advice on how to govern a society, his suggestion. By not exalting the worthy.
Ooh, that's another challenging one.
Right. What could he possibly mean by that? It seems to challenge so much of our conventional wisdom about merit and reward. I really hope you'll join me to find out.